an important element of democratizing access to data is be able to know that the right set of folks have the appropriate access controls, and that is very difficult to do when data is scattered amongst a number of processes.
I'm thrilled today to have our guest, Christian Kleinerman, on the podcast today. Christian joins us from Snowflake, where he serves as their SVP of Product. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So Christian and I have sort of worked fairly closely on Simon's roadmap and aligned with some of the pretty cool stuff that Snowflake has built over the last 6-7 years. Christian doesn't remember this, but he actually came to our office, I think in 2016, when we were about 25 people on the corner of 12th Street and Broadway in New York City. And I didn't even know he was going to come to the office until about 10 minutes beforehand. One of our engineering directors beckoned me in. I hopped in and we had a great conversation. But fast forward to 2023, you were really in a very different world than certainly when Simon Data was founded, and I think really sort of phase end of sort of Snowflake's journey as what's now been and emerged as a massive business.
Actually, I do remember that visit. Do remember.
Yes. Today we're going to be talking about really the evolution of sort of where cloud data is heading. And for folks who have been keeping up with Snowflake, you may hear them saying this term data platform. But then when you go back to your data team, you might hear this term data warehouse. And you sort of ask the question, like, what's the difference? And really, are we splitting straws here or not? And really the episode of today's show is really focused on this notion of this next phase of Snowflake's journey, where Snowflake is today, where they're heading, and really just dig into the data platform aspect that transcends the data warehousing capabilities, which is really just a small part today of what Snowflake actually does. And with this, really asked a fundamental question around how does Snowflake's data platform change data architectures, and more critically, how does it change your marketing technology systems capabilities, your ability to personalize, and your ability to really affect that next generation of customer experience. Maybe before I sort of kick off into specific topics, Christian, do you want to add a bit, maybe just to the vision and talk maybe for a few seconds around Snowflake's data platform?
Certainly. I would say that for the longest time, but probably the early beginnings of Snowflake, an important goal was around the elimination of silos, data silos to be specific, such that organizations could make decisions across all the data that they have between different systems, between different businesses, between different customers, so you can think holistically. Our founders would probably get a little bit upset if you tell them, oh, you started only as a data warehousing company. They were focused on both data warehousing as much as Hadoop and the big data technologies back in the day, because the promise of Hadoop was correct in many ways. Put your data in a single system, in a single platform. It's only that they solved for that part of the problem, and then they created 20 other problems. And our goal was create a platform where you can think through data holistically, but with the familiar high-performance programming models that were used by traditional database system. And what we've been doing over the last 6-7 years is expanding that original vision towards not only eliminating silos in organizations, but also avoid the re-siloing that keeps happening by data getting copied into different systems. And the reason why all of that matters is data copies are, at least in my mind, the number one enemy of a simple and robust governance platform or a governance approach. Governance here understood as security and privacy. So our goal is help organizations to have the data in a single consistent platform with a single copy of each relevant data set that simplifies not only governance and security, but also, most important, which is the topic of our partnership, how do you get value out of the data?
So let's actually start with governance, because I think when a lot of folks think about centralized data, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of the obvious benefits around I have data from the web, I have data from offline, I have data from my support system. But I think to really appreciate the notion of integrated governance, you sort of need to think through what data silos look like. And I think one of the things that I think sometimes takes folks a bit to really get their head around, is just how hard it can be to manage data, if it's not living in a single place. So maybe you can speak to that in particular for marketers listening to the show today, issues around GDPR compliance, and really just sort of a new world we live in around consumer expectations around how their data is treated. Why is this harder to do when you have silos than if everything is centralized together?
Yeah. So the topic of governance is broad, and maybe the table stakes on governance is security, and you want to make sure that your data is secure. And the most difficult way to secure your data is not knowing where your data is. If different analysts or individuals in your organization start making copies of data, embedding it in, say, a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet starts getting emailed around, I think there is very little hope of being able to enforce security on that type of data, and let alone deal with the consequences. What would happen if some of that data leaked or landed in the wrong hands? So security is harder to do if you don't know where your data is. That's like premise number one, where silos get in the way. The other part of it is you want to be able to give access to data to anyone that needs it within the organization. And again, it gets much easier if you have all the data under a single platform, and you can say, here's, for example, all the folks in my marketing team, or all the folks in my performance marketing team, or all the folks in other function, maybe the security administrators, they have different permissions and different access controls. Maybe they get to see full fidelity of the data as opposed to partially masked data. So I would say an important element of democratizing access to data is be able to know that the right set of folks have the appropriate access controls, and that is very difficult to do when data is scattered amongst a number of processes. You mentioned GDPR, which complicates all of this governance problem by, I would say, maybe by an order of magnitude. There are privacy implications, what do you do with PII or individual data, but there are also some regulatory requirements around, you need to be able to enforce deletions. If I, as a user, come and say, Jason, please delete all the information you have about me, for you to be able to comply with that request, you first need to know, where is all the data you have about me? Again, single platform helps you with all of that. And maybe the last point around compliance is the notion that having the data, all of the data for your organization in a single place, is increasingly unlikely. The reason being, again, regulation and compliance mandates are saying the data of nationals from my country need to reside in my country. This is happening in Europe, which is where it started, but you hear it in India, in Canada, and many countries are down this path. So eventually what you want is a platform where you can say, here's the data where I can manage it across geographies, potentially across cloud providers, with a consistent interface, and again, with a simple common governance element. So that's the reason why all of this is important. And the only way to reason through the company's broad data set is centralizing and eliminating silos.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think through how so many MarTech architectures work today with the centralized CDP model, which effectively works by air quotes activating your data, which effectively ships a complete copy of all your customer data out into 3, 4, a dozen or more different systems. And you said a few things that I think are worth focusing on, because obviously having your data copied into 12 places, each one of those different places poses a security risk on itself, but there are other benefits that Snowflake brings to the picture around permissioning, who can see which data, around geolocation, with an emerging set of European regulations, that all this gets thrown out the door as soon as you ship, your data, outside of a governed environment. I think it's one of these things that, while, so many marketing UIs are so easy, to use, you just click a single button and it goes, but you're really just, opening up a whole can of issues that, otherwise could have been locked down and regulated already.
Yeah, and maybe I would add, not a criticism of the state of the art or where the industry has been at large, is if you put yourself in the shoes of someone that needs to run a campaign, obtain some results, and drive some metric, and they're waiting for a central governance team that every request takes forever and it's slow, or the platform and technology is not there, then you have no better alternative than take some risks. And a lot of what we're working on enabling is the notion of you do not need to incur those trade-offs. You'll hear us talking about programmability without trade-offs or getting value out of data without trade-offs, which is it would be nice for marketers to be able to move at the speed that they want, deliver campaigns, change data sets, change sources, change signals as fast as they need to, but again, without compromising central governance. And that's the entire value prop of where Snowflake is headed broadly, on enable central teams to impose policies and security rules and role filters, but it does not come at the expense of folks that want to move fast, and businesses and business dynamics are moving faster and faster every day.
Let's sort of wrap up and put governance behind us. And it's for so many business stakeholders, especially folks out of IT and folks out of data, these issues aren't issues unless they become issues. Although that's quickly changing by the day. Let's actually talk about creating incremental revenue and driving business results, and really what does the promise of centralized data bring, and why is it any different than 10 years ago when I could just put a pixel on my website, collect some data on what customers are doing, have it in a centralized SaaS repository, and then wipe my hands and call it a day.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to be able to better personalize and customize your touch points with your users or your customers. The more every organization is data driven, the more data is getting collected about those different touch points. And we all expect as consumers the ability to interact with organizations that understand us as individuals and can personalize experiences for us. Case in point, yesterday I got an email, someone marketing something that I am already a customer of. Say, hey, you should join this program. Like, clearly, whatever campaign was behind that did not have access to the data set or the silo that contains the information that I've been a paying customer of that service for actually a few years. That is the type of stuff that I think that the organizations that are better at correlating data across sources, at understanding longitudinally the journey for every user, are going to end up with more effective campaigns. And at the end of the day, that's how you outperform. Either you do better spending or better results of your marketing dollars, or at the end of the day, just better experiences. But I think data is at the heart of more effective and more personalized experiences.
Yeah, no, and it's even just reflecting back on the last 6-7 years, at least since we've really gotten to know Snowflake well. We grew up in New York City with a lot of direct-to-consumer vertically integrated e-commerce brands, folks like BarkBox and Casper. These brands now have real offline distribution channels, and I think what a lot of e-com has seen is that you must go omni-channel, you must go multi-channel, not just on marketing but actually in distribution. And of course, when COVID came, anyone who wasn't e-commerce went e-commerce pretty quickly. So now we're in a completely new world where the business requirements and the hyper-competitive nature of e-commerce at least is sort of one of end verticals. The data is way more complex than it was even 4 years ago. And this is why investing in data centrally with incredibly scalable and flexible data platforms is really sort of step one, and why systems that might have worked 3-4 years ago don't even work at all today.
I fully agree, and maybe I would add, all that you need is one company in each category or industry or use case to do it well for everybody else to be behind. And the technology exists, evidenced by Snowflake and by what you guys are doing on top of Snowflake, to create those experiences that leverage the wealth of data that an organization can have. And again, it just takes one company to do it in one industry for everyone else to look as if they're not up to par. And that's the world that we're jointly trying to create.
Yeah, so let's talk about where things are heading for a few minutes, or some other benefits, and we'll talk about where things are heading. And I know one big challenge around data systems today, and Snowflake for that matter, certainly in this bucket, is that adoption within IT and data teams is high. You write SQL, there's all sorts of robust tooling if you know Python, and Snowflake has a very complete set of capabilities that really enable technical stakeholders, and data engineers, data analysts, data scientists to drive a ton of value. But today, in terms of direct access to Snowflakes outside of data, the tooling is sort of limited. And so maybe we can talk about a couple of trends, across native apps, across LLMs, that are in the hopper, or out in the wild, are being cooked up, Christian, that you think can really be game changers to affect that.
Yeah, the broader strategy that we're pursuing is not to say there should be a single marketing tool or a single approach to anything. What we want to do is create a very rich ecosystem in every category. You can say it applies to cybersecurity or it applies to other use cases, but in marketing in particular, what we want is to create a world where, as I said, there are no trade-offs between what a central security and governance team may want to be true about the data, but also what the business and marketing teams may want to be true about their ability to run campaigns, their ability to be agile. And if data copies are not the answer, because data copies are a way to move data into a broad set of tools and applications, then the answer from our perspective is to turn that on its head. We want the applications to be able to run close to where the data resides, avoiding copies, which have all the governance problems that we discussed about, but also it has efficiencies. If I don't need to have a process that synchronizes data between my data platform and say my CDP, but my CDP can run natively, like Simon Data is doing, on top of Snowflake data, it just removes all sorts of integration pain points. So what we've done in Snowflake is we've expanded the set of business logic that can run close to the data. Earlier on, we were focused on hosting the Java runtime. You mentioned the Python runtime securely inside Snowflake. And one of the things that we announced in the last couple of weeks is the ability to bring arbitrary business logic through the hosting of Docker containers within the security and governance perimeter of Snowflake. That enables a much broader set of use cases to run closer to the data. And obviously, in the state of the industry that we're in, generative AI and LLMs are an important part of what business logic or what rich access to the data can look like. If you want to enable conversational access to data, or if you want to enable LLM-powered summarization or copy generation, all of that, you want to do it again without making a copy of the data. And the way we enable all this is through this new container hosting that we call Snowpark Container Services. But the broad approach, the broad goal of what we're trying to do as a platform and enabling ecosystem is bring the logic, bring the applications to run closer to the data, so data doesn't have to be copied out.
That's we obviously at Simon are incredibly familiar here. But one of the big things I think is just worth calling out is just really it's sort of a rethinking around how SaaS works. And it's not really software as a service. It's software that sort of sits on top, and fully in line with your data. And when you sort of think through, where things can head and what, SaaS might look like, 2, 3, 4 years out, I think we're looking at a big phase shift. And, fundamentally, for brands that are making, $1 million, $10 million, we have customers who are spending well upwards of $100 million a year across technology and teams and beyond. These are huge bets that are being made. These are the crown jewels that, so many businesses are putting together, for all the reasons that, we just went through that, Christian detailed, both across, security and around leveraging obviously leveraging, these assets to, affect business outcomes and customer experiences. It really does ask some very basic questions around, how does data move back and forth and where does the application live? And, I think we're headed in for some both disruptive and exciting times ahead, depending on, which side of things you live on.
100%. Actually, the same statement that I made about you just need one platform to go and embrace the modern way of doing things, I think is going to be true. You just need one platform to say, I'm going to bring rich business logic and a rich application to run closer to the data. And customers, organizations are going to see that as the better model And that's going to disrupt everyone else that is not doing it that way. You guys are at the forefront of this, which we're very excited about. And as a platform, the value comes from enabling all these types of use cases. At the end of the day, success for all of this is entirely about business agility, not only for all the application developers, but probably most important to all the consumers and users that can leverage those tools and can decide to change a marketing campaign and add maybe an additional field or something like that, all within minutes. There should be no reason to have to put a request to, I don't know, some central team to do an ETL. All of that is going to be a story of the past. So I'm 100% with you, Jason. There's excitement and opportunity in front of us. And for certain folks, there's disruption in front of us.
Yeah, I've been using an analogy recently, around data enablement, based off of my 4-year-old and 8-year-old, sons. The 4-year-old, when he comes to the kitchen and wants some food, I go into the fridge and I make him something and give it to him. But the 8-year-old, he says he's hungry. I say, dude, just go open up the fridge door and make whatever you want. And by the way, if there's something you don't want, we'll have a conversation around getting it for you next time. So I think, this sort of, reflects the maturation of data, in that today we really live, in an age where predominantly, business stakeholders and marketers are really at the mercy of, the chefs, or the data team to give them, and to assemble their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, when in reality, as they grow up, they can pretty easily, make their own, turkey sandwiches, out of the cold cut drawer and the bread box.
So I live that reality. I distinctly remember past life, wanted to send an email to a set of users. And then we said, can we only send it to a subset that meets some criteria? And the data for that criteria was not available. And that turned into a 3-month project. Everything else was ready. And so I've lived that whole, you are in the hands of certain other people that control the data. And what we're working jointly to enable is, that should be a thing of the past. Let's just move fast, because business is not slowing down.
Yep. So, Christian, bonus question before we conclude and wrap here. If you were to have this conversation again with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Anyone in the world is a broad net to cast. But I would probably look at an organization that is great at leveraging their data to understand their users and drive marketing and promotions and next best action type of operation. Probably top of mind or comes to mind at this point, Netflix. Maybe I would go try to have a sit down with Reed Hastings. I think he well understands the value of data, the value of personalizing the experience that you get. And I think we want to enable more and more companies to be able to be that data driven.
Yep. No, and I'm sure, like myself, many listeners are big Netflix fans, and it is pretty crazy how they're able to pretty accurately guess what I might want to watch when I first open up the app. So that's a great take. So really just recapping things today, I think, look, there's a lot of seemingly boring stuff happening around data architectures and conversations with data teams that so many marketers are having today. But ultimately, it's really one of redefining a path forward. It's really one of a completely new way of understanding the business. Investing in really a centralized asset of excellence that, quite frankly, could never existed before. In a previous generations of Hadoop and on-prem systems, I built these out, and it's a big part of my founding story. They were incredibly powerful but inaccessible. The cloud changed everything. And I think no one has executed better on the vision of cloud data than Snowflake. And I think we're really just in for very exciting times ahead. So Christian, for anyone listening today and wants to learn more about Snowflake, where should they go?
Probably start with our website, snowflake.com. There's a wealth of resources there, both technical resources, customer references. There's a number of videos. So that's the easy place to start. And I think we have a little bit for everyone. But the most important thing is what you alluded to. We want to simplify the art of data management, the state of infrastructure management, such that everyone can go and get value out of data.
Great. And thank you to everyone listening to this episode of the Data Unlocked podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Simon Data, please visit us on the web at simondata.com or email us at hello@simondata.